What if love isn't a feeling as much as it is a language? Every person receives care differently, and Jesus seemed to understand this instinctively. In this segment, we'll explore the 5 love languages, how Jesus uniquely connected with each person he met, and why the most powerful act of love may simply be learning how another person experiences it. So, what's this unique connection? And we touched a little bit in our previous segment on Jesus' relationship with people.
Well, part of the thing that shocked me is with Jesus, being divine and perfect. I was kind of shocked to know that he had differing relationships with siblings, his own siblings, even. And that told me that every relationship he had to work at, just like everyone else. And they're
Yeah.
not maybe going to all be perfect because it doesn't just depend on you, it depends on the other person to engage with you. And so if someone is, and some relationships are easier than others.
Yeah.
Maybe we interpret each other's cues a little easier or whatever. But Jesus actually got along really excellently with most of his siblings, but there were some difficult relationships. He was always patient. He was always forbearing and tolerant. And in the end, that graciousness and that goodness won the difficult relationships over to
Hmm.
be good relationships. So that goes to show that if you're persistent and you really are trying, you really show the patience and the grace for someone that maybe isn't that easy of a relationship. mm, I'm guessing most of the time those relationships could be healed. And that's what this comes down to is the communication can either harm or heal, and that's what we want. Obviously, we want to project the love and the healing aspect of communication to maintain these great relationships.
As you're talking, Susan, something that comes to mind, especially when you're talking about Jesus, is example. You know how he taught through example. It wasn't just, scolding or, giving you a recommendation. It was really, living up to what he was teaching. You brought up his siblings, and it's something that a lot of people do not know. And like you said, it gives you a lot of dimension and context in what he had to experience, go through, and many of the things that we go through. It wasn't that, everybody was just on his feet, adoring him or glorifying him. He had, the typical relationships, maybe not as a conflictive, maybe, or as earthly, but there were those relationships. So it's interesting how he showed that example, and there's some cases maybe you can bring up a few, but what can you tell us about this way that he taught, or that he showed this love through his
Well,
language?
the time when he took his younger brother Jude to Jerusalem for
Yeah.
Passover for his first time to go to the temple and be confirmed, from finishing his schooling. The first thing Jude did was get in trouble and get arrested. And he was trying to, stand up for a girl who had been mistreated by a Roman soldier.
It was
But
a righteous cause. Yeah, we can give him that. Yeah.
yeah, but he was kind of a hothead and, spoke out quickly and didn't think and immediately got arrested. So he missed all of the ceremonies that he was meant to go to and enjoy because he was in jail all weekend. So Jesus stayed with him at the jail.
Yeah.
And as time went on, the family never knew because he didn't tell them right. Well, I guess they did know. Eventually, he told them, but not right away. But anyway, um, over some other things, the family were ready to throw him out, throw Jude out on the street. And Jesus actually said, "No, give him time, give him a chance to work things out." He wouldn't work. He wasn't contributing to the family. He was out of school already, and he could have worked if he wanted
He
to.
was that family member that we all know and have, right?
Yeah. And so Jesus said, "No,
It's
please
which is hard
stay a
to
little bit
love
more."
sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And eventually, Jesus won him over. He found a great girl. He got married. He contributed to the family. he was always there on the weekends, to visit with Jesus, and he ended up being really loyal and a loving. He was there when Jesus was baptized, actually.
Yeah,
And
he was there throughout his from all his siblings. I think he was one of the most active throughout his public ministry, right?
yeah, exactly. And it just goes to show that Jesus put the time and the care into that relationship, and and he was rewarded with a really loyal and loving brother. And it was a great relationship. So it was healed over, I mean, many times that he was a little difficult to have in the family, but he was worth the effort. And Jesus felt that
Yeah.
way too. Whereas the other part of the family might have given up on him.
Yeah, 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 which is very important, and one thing that's important, in saying to understand other people, and this is something, as we were saying, empathy and how that goes really a long way. When you have a genuine desire to have a conversation and not just, to get the benefit of something, or just to sell in many cases, or just, do without. But when you genuinely engage, even if it's just very simple, um, and that person, and the key word is genuinely, because then that person really feels that interest, and it can be something very simple where you compliment them on something, or you ask them about something they have, or start a conversation, but it's something that becomes an interest, that it's of their interest, or you try to help them out, and many times, I see somebody trying to do something in the train, or trying to get by, and I can just walk by and not mind, but I see that they're struggling, and I lend a hand, and I point them out, and you can see that, and how the energy, and this is something I was talking with my cousin the other day. It's not just verbal communication, nor nonverbal communication. There's an energy, a vibe, that really changes the attitude and into positive. And it comes down to a lot to energy. You can have negative and positive or neutral. And in this case, you kind of change it to a positive polarity, right?
I think you're
So,
so right.
I mean, I just wanted to share that. And what was your opinion on that?
I totally think you're right about that because the energy really is reflecting, it is coming from a place of love. Just, you can, and a person can perceive that. They sense when you're being genuine and when you're being honest,
Yeah.
sincere. And that's where this comes from, is this sincerity that you're really concerned for them. Even if it's a gesture of helping someone with a door, if they're carrying groceries or whatever, they sense that it's coming from concern and care for them.
Yeah, you're going out of your way. You're stepping out of your daily
Yeah.
existence to mind them.
And a lot of people label that as service, but what it comes down to is a genuine caring for persons that
Yeah.
even you don't know. But I was looking through some um, references as before we came on, and really, if you believe that God is the Father of all,
Hmm.
then there is no stranger. That's what Jesus said. There are really no strangers.
Yeah.
There should be some happiness in meeting anyone that's a new brother or sister. And if you think of it in that way, um, it really brings a different aspect to it than just service. It's extending God's love really to another. And that's what's important about it to me, is that it's very healing to everyone. When
Yeah.
you think of it in that way, you're not really burdened. The love is flowing through you from
Yeah,
God.
yeah, no, none at all. I mean, and on the contrary, what you get from that connection, I think, is very rewarding, and I think, that's a lot of people do not see the value in that. It's not that, oh, I'm just giving out to them, but what you get in part, that feeling, that energy that you get from that exchange, is really, really powerful. So that really feeds your soul, in my opinion.
It really does. I know a lot of people say just do the service and eventually you'll be rewarded from it. I think that's true, but I think that um, I think that it comes from the heart in the first place. I don't think
Yeah,
you
the genuine, like that's the purpose. I mean, the reason when it's really heartfelt, that really goes a long way.
and just a smile. It said
Yeah.
that, Jesus went around spreading good cheer and smiles to hundreds of people when he traveled, and it gives many, many cases of people he met just briefly, and it changed their lives. So, even a smile,
Yeah.
even though it might not seem like a lot,
Oh, it's powerful.
the difference
Eh,
in a person's day, you have no idea what they've been through and how a positive gesture like that really makes a difference.
Yeah, yeah. I'm for one is that I'm a very hard believer in smiles, and that's something that become accustomed to me. And maybe you can see that in my podcast and every relationship I have, any communication, I tend to smile, and it's just a normal tendency, and I try to. And it's interesting now that we're talking, and maybe I hadn't really realized it in depth, but that ups the frequency, and regardless of what situation, you can be in a business situation. I always try to crack a joke. I mean, that's the best thing to do when you're in a business situation and everything is very tense, and you sense that somebody needs something, and that's the idea. When you crack it on, and you do it in a way that kind of benefits the other person, in a way that really opens up, and they really lower their guard, and that really starts a very nice and very positive communication flow, definitely.
Yes, definitely. And it shows that, we know humor is healing too. So anytime that you can share a laugh, that's a beginning. It's a beginning right there of a good relationship. Yeah, humor is wonderful. And it relaxes the whole situation.
And I'm also a very big believer in laughing. And when you look at your really closest relationships, your friends, you're always joking, and it's interesting. And the other day I was realizing and was thinking about this, and it's really the people that you grew up with, or your deep friends. They're the ones that know all your flaws, that know what you've been through. They know if you're bluffing or not. If if they know if what's behind anything. So they really know you. So when you get into this dynamic, when it's really cracking jokes and make poking fun, in a positive way, you can where your boundaries are, but that really lightens everything up. And this is something that I really like about the Urantia book. It's I'm going to paraphrase, that says that laughter and comedy, I think, is the best antidote to the ego, the exaltation of the ego. So I mean,
Exactly.
when you get in those dynamics, with people that you need to take light, and that they know, you understand that you have to take things light. And I like one concept about the Mayan matrix pattern. It's called el encantamiento del sueño, which is the dream spell. And it says that we come into this material life and play, we play in a play, and we take on different characters. And you go, somebody goes and becomes a doctor throughout the day, but he comes home and he's a father, and he gets scolded by his wife, maybe the same way that anybody else, and it's the same dynamics, but you find in a play. So how interesting and important is that we see with, very lightheartedness, these relationships, and we do not take ourselves so seriously in the way that we relate with each other, right?
I agree. And it's a challenge. I come from a serious kind of family in the first place. So it's a challenge for me to kind of I mean, I feel like I'm a positive and an enthusiastic and person, but at the same time, I'm probably not the one joking around because it never seems to work. But there's nothing better than somebody laughing at something I've said. It's like a joy for me. So that's like a gift
Yeah,
that I receive
definitely.
of love when someone gets me and thinks it's funny. That's wonderful, but it's one of the rare things because I don't think I'm that funny at all, but I just must have a different sense of humor or whatever. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it really the vibe, you can share positive um feelings through that. And
yeah.
yeah, that's important to lift someone else up and you can see how, how they
Well, I mean, there's even the movie Patch Adams, and there's a whole study and everything. How comedy, and they, the doctors, and there's a lot of foundations throughout the world that go to hospitals and make their patients laugh, and that gives them, that chemically also uplifts them, not only energetically. So the importance of making somebody, and as we were talking, and I think, because we're talking about the way Jesus communicated in his communication or language. um, it's really taking interest. I mean, that's one of the other key takeaways. When you really take interest, and this is something that I learned from my grandfather. And this is something that I really take to heart. And I met a lot of people because he was a businessman, and one of the things that everybody can tell you is that he always made you feel important, and regardless of the person that you were, you could be the worker in the line, and he knew a lot of stuff. And I mean, I'm a younger generation, and anybody that was, from that time would always talk to me about my grandfather, and would give me this, that, customers, everybody. And that's really important because he always asked about them. He knew about certain things, and he took care, of just the conversation. So that really goes a long way. And you don't even know. Yesterday, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a gentleman, that he had sort of addiction problems, and things kind of came out into what happens in because here in Europe you don't have those rituals and ceremonies and sacred rites and everything, like in the Americas, in the U.S. with the Native Americans, in Mexico with Mesoamerica. And I explained to him how everything is a ritual, and depending on the way that you intend it. And he was moved, and I told him, you should try to do it, and try to focus on the fire, and try to meditate, and try to break from those addictions. And it was probably a 5-minute conversation, and I really was heartfelt, and I gave him my true opinion, and he was really thankful. And he told me, it was a really good conversation, and thank you for having this conversation with me. I don't know if that really changed his life or not, but in that moment, maybe a seed that really changed them.
It sounds like you came from the right place with caring for him. It was meant to help uplift him. And that's exactly what Jesus did. And actually, I ran across something that said he never followed up with the people. He assumed that they would grab the positive energy, and and it said that they never felt that they were confiding in him. They always felt they were conferring with him. He
Mm,
always made them feel
yeah.
worthy and equal, and
Uh,
he had a way of
I like this.
yeah,
It's not
the
a
val
confession, because that's really important part in Catholicism, confession in many parts of Christianity, but it's conferring. I like this. It's really, sharing, and not really, from a guilt standpoint, but rather a loving standpoint, of understanding and empathy, right?
he made them feel like, we're all in this together, and he was their help, there to support them, there to cheer them on, basically, and that's what he
Yeah,
did. It said that he never really, encouraged pity. He
yeah.
he empowered them with good, you know, advice. I hate to call it advice because but he had always good ideas for them,
Yeah, with
to
good information,
yeah.
with truth. I mean, truth is boundless, and it's timeless. That's another thing that we were talking about the other day. How the mythical stories and the mythical archetypes, they can be thousands of years old. uh, and the moral, ethical, and religious norms can change. Societies and civilizations can change, but the values and the important information from those stories are true to our day. So that's really immutable. Those truths and those facts that really guide us, and set those cornerstones are really important in throughout our lives. And it's important that we communicate. And this is, guiding me into that, how important it is to communicate these virtues, these values, these stories as well. That can really uh, um, set you in the right direction. If you have any closing remarks on Jesus, we're gonna close this segment right here, and then move into the second mile. But I don't know if you want to add something before we move.
Yeah, I have one other, story that he met a young boy in the mountains that was discouraged. He had,
Okay.
he had not found any comfort from his friends. His father had passed away when he was 12, and he basically went to the hills to be alone because he just was so discouraged. Jesus found him, and as they were traveling through, and asked him, what has discouraged you so much on such a beautiful day as today. And the boy really wasn't willing to talk, and so his first approach didn't work. So Jesus, of course, said, well, I can tell that you're not, feeling well and you've come out here to be alone. So obviously you don't really want to talk. But as I look at you, I really think, there's something at all that I can do for you. I would be glad to do it. And the boy still didn't want to talk. So he said, well, would it be possible for me to, you know, impose upon you? Do you know these trails very well? Could you help me find my way to Phoenix? And the boy knew the area really well, and he perked up and he said, "Oh, yeah, I can show you the trails." And he gave him all the details and mapped it out for him, and everything. And it engaged him in the
Mm.
conversation only. And so
Yeah, yeah,
Jesus,
yeah.
you know, as he was thanking him and leaving, he turned around suddenly and he said, since you've helped me so much, it would be thoughtless for me to leave if I didn't ask you, what could I do for you? Since I know what it's like to be downcast. I've been there. And he said, since you've asked me, and the boy said, well, I didn't ask you for anything. He said, you did by the look. He said, I could see that you need someone to talk to. And so they finally sat down and had a great conversation, and it changed the boy's life. He encouraged him to be a man, to get out there in the world. He had a healthy body and to make the most of his life and to turn it around. And it did. It worked.
A
And
simple conversation. Yeah,
yeah, the boy really just needed someone to care enough to be persistent enough to talk to
yeah,
him and
yeah.
help him, encourage him. And that was, just shows the persistence Jesus had until he broke through the exterior and the love he showed, you know, and it was well received.
Well, I like this story to end this segment because we're going to talk about going the second mile. So stay tuned. On the Divine Within podcast, we share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.